200 years ago, monarchy was falling to the power of people's revolutions. Industry and commerce were becoming the driving forces of existence, and advances in science were changing the way life itself was understood. Artists all over the world were inspired by these times of dramatic change. In Britain, a group of poets and novelists pioneered an alternative way of living and of looking at the world. Among them were William Blake, in the midst of this great new metropolis lived a small boy who dreamed of a very different world. One day in July 1765, he walked from Soho in London to the fields of Peckham Rye, just beyond the city. Lying on the grass, staring up at the light filtering through the trees, he experienced a vision. He saw the trees filled with angelic beings, their bright wings bespangling every bough like stars.
To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour.
The boy's name was William Blake. Throughout his life, he never forgot his childhood vision. He always believed that it was a glimpse of an eternal world, far from the horrors of the city. The Romantics believed that spontaneous childhood visions were the source of adult inspiration. A child allowed to play and dream would become an imaginative adult. But childhood itself was being destroyed by the industrial age. A new workforce was emerging. Boys of between 4 and 7 were sold into labor by their parents and sent to clean the city's chimneys. Many suffocated, and most became deformed. William Blake was touched by the wretched lives of these children. He began to write simple rhymes that expressed the yearning for their redemption.
As Tom was asleeping, he had such a sight of thousands of sweepers, Dick, Joe, Ned and Jack, all of them locked up in coffins of black. Then come by an angel who had a bright key. He opened the coffins, set them all free. Then down a green plain, leaping, laughing, they run. And wash in a river and shine in the sun.
Blake's short rhymes about children became a collection of illuminated poems entitled Songs of Innocence. They were inspired by the childhood years he spent with his young brother, Robert.
Sound the flute, now is mute, birds delight, day and night.
Night away, full of joy, little girl, sweet and small, cock does crow,
Moon
so
like
do
a
you.
flower in heaven's high bower, with silent delight, sits
Little
and
boy,
smiles.
full of joy, little girl, sweet and small, cock does crow, so
Then
do
every
you.
man of every
Merry
clime
voice,
that prays in his distress, prays too the human form divine, love, mercy,
pity, peace.
But in February 1787, Blake's own innocence was shattered when Robert was struck by an illness. In the upstairs room of their house at 28 Poland Street, Blake sat with him for 2 weeks, hardly sleeping, watching his brother's health decline. At the last solemn moment of Robert's life, Blake saw his spirit rise from his body and ascend through the ceiling. Blake recollected that the spirit had been clapping its hands for joy. It was one of many visions of infinity that Blake would have throughout his life. Robert had joined the angels and the spirits of the chimney sweeps in a joyful eternity. But Blake himself would be obliged to find joy in the human world. After Robert's death, Blake moved over the river to the leafy outskirts of London. He lived in Hercules Road in Lambeth, a place where he tried to build himself a new life, free from the corruption of the city. But one morning, he looked from his window and was horrified. It was a sight that intensely angered Blake. He demanded that the boy be set free instantly. It seemed intolerable to him that any child, any man, should be subjected to such miseries. The image was at odds with everything Blake believed about the spiritual purity of childhood. His anger entered his poetry. He began to write a bleak companion to his songs of innocence, songs of experience. In these poems, there would be no redemption for the children.
The weeping child could not be heard. The weeping parents wept in vain. They'd stripped into his little shirt and bound him in an iron chain, and burned him in a holy place where many had been burned before. The weeping parents wept in vain. Are such things done on Albion's shore?
Blake feared for the future lives of England's children. His was one of the first voices raised to warn against the destructive potential of the Industrial Revolution.
It turns that which is soul and life into a mill or machine.
Blake foresaw a world where people would be engaged in endless toil, their lives disfigured by the laws of the factory and the industrial system. He imagined seeing the world through their eyes.
They told me that I had 5 senses to enclose me up. And they enclosed my infinite brain into a narrow circle. One command, one joy, one desire, one curse, one weight, one measure, one king, one God, one law.
Just a short walk from Blake's house in Lambeth by the Thames, where now stands an office building, stood Albion Mill. It was the first factory in London, designed to produce some 6,000 bushels of flour each week. For Blake, the repetitive production lines of these huge new mills cast human identity into uniform molds, endlessly repeatable. Spirituality and imagination were denied or forgotten. Blake referred to Satan as the miller of eternity. In one of his poems, Satan's father congratulates his son on his evil creations.
O Satan, my youngest born, to mortals thy mills seem everything.
Blake expressed his fury in words that have become the most familiar lines of English poetry.
And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green? And was the Holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen?
William Blake's most famous lines are now sung as Jerusalem, an unofficial national anthem. But they were written as a poem of radical protest against the corruption of industry and commerce, a manifesto for the Romantic poets, horrified by the darkness descending upon England.
And did the countenance divine shine forth upon our clouded hills? And was Jerusalem builded here among these dark, satanic mills?
One evening in March 1791, Albion Mill caught fire. Blake would have seen the flames rising above the city, and he might have rejoiced with the millers who celebrated on Blackfriars Bridge. The factory was destroyed, and remained a blackened and empty shell until its demolition in 1809. Blake passed it every time he walked into the city, a symbol of hope in an increasingly mechanized world. Anyone who has ever yearned for a simple life, free from the constraints of modern society, owes a debt to William Blake. News of the American Revolution exhilarated the young radicals of Britain. But new ideas of liberty would do more than undermine respect for the king and the existing political order. They would also bring about an entirely new way of looking at the world. The Romantic Revolution was underway. At the forefront of this revolution was a Londoner named William Blake. He saw the events in America as a great prophecy of a future world.
Red rose the clouds from the Atlantic in vast wheels of blood. The King of England, looking westwards, trembles at the vision. Let the slave grinding in the mill run out into the fields. Let him look up into the heavens and laugh in the bright air, for empire is no more.
In 1779, at the age of 21, Blake was being instructed by the greatest British artist of the period, Sir Joshua Reynolds. Reynolds was what we now describe as the ultimate establishment figure, rich, respected, and eminent. He believed in an ideal art based upon study and the classical principles of order, unity, harmony, and rationality. Blake believed the opposite, that the imagination was the force that made great art. He rebelled against his teacher.
This man was hired to depress art. I say taste and genius are not teachable or acquirable, and are born with us. Reynolds says the contrary. Such artists as Reynolds are at all times hired by the Satans for the depression of art. A pretense to art. To destroy art.
Blake was an instinctive libertarian who sought freedom from the system that enslaved him. He eventually abandoned the teachings of Reynolds and became an independent artist. He poured his radical visionary ideas into poetry, drawing, and engravings. In 1780, Blake completed a design for a print that he entitled Albion Rose. It is a young man with his arms outstretched in a gesture of liberation. There is such a look of energy and exaltation upon his face that some people believe it must be a self-portrait. Blake lived in Poland Street with his wife, Catherine, and his younger brother, Robert. all three united in a life of constant financial struggle. Their home was at number 28, now home to a hairdressing salon. Blake had very few readers and was obliged to publish his own work himself. But it remains as a great document of the revolutionary anger of a new generation in an oppressive city.
I wander through each chartered street, near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every ban, the mind-forged manacles I hear.
The mind-forged manacles that Blake perceived were the prisons of custom and of habit. No one could escape from the dreary round of duty and obedience demanded by the old order of society. The will and imagination of each person were locked away. Life itself had become a prison.
Man was born free, and everywhere he is in chains.
Blake, like Rousseau and Paine before him, saw human beings as shackled and chained in their daily lives. It was an idea that was slowly spreading through the radicals of Europe.